Okay, hours ahead of Russia's St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, Ukraine strikes the outskirts of St. Petersburg, hitting a major oil terminal and a naval base. NATO Chief Mark Rutte and Zelensky hold a joint press conference in Kyiv. Moscow announces a quote new paradigm in the Russia Ukraine war, and Armenian parliamentary elections are to take place this Sunday, June 7th. I'm Sophia Marie. Let's get into news of the region. Hey guys, it's Sophia. I'm a graduate of Georgetown and Oxford. Make sure to like, follow, and repost. I do these updates on the East European, former Soviet space daily. Okay, most major news today, all in the headlines, is the fact that early this morning, just hours ahead of the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, Ukraine struck major targets in St. Petersburg. So among locations hit by Ukraine include the St. Petersburg oil terminal located 1,100 kilometers away from Ukraine and a naval base. Zelensky spoke on these attacks in the aftermath of them, saying they allow Ukraine to negotiate the end of the war on, quote, equal footing. So the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum obviously is seen as like Russia's Davos equivalent. This will be the first time since 2018 that a US delegation will be there. So Rodney Cook is listed by Reuters as leading the official US delegation. So he is the chairman of the US Commission of Fine Arts, and he's also the man overseeing the Trump White House ballroom extension project. Now, in other news, the NATO chief Mark Rutte was in Kyiv, Ukraine today. He held a joint press conference with President Zelensky after the massive Russian attack, which killed 22 in Ukraine in overnight attacks, which happened yesterday. Mark Rutte now directed a statement to, quote, young Russians and their families, telling them that if they sign up for the war, they will likely die. So a statement from the NATO chief Mark Rutte, quote, men like you who join the fight, you won't be trained. Equipment they'll provide you with is substandard. There is a very high chance you'll die or be wounded while you're out there. Now, this was just a day after a Russian attack killed 22 in Ukraine. Now, Moscow just recently announced there is a quote new paradigm in the war with Ukraine, saying that it is ramping up attacks in retaliation for the attack they said Ukraine did on a student dormitory in Russian occupied Ukraine. Now, Kyiv has denied targeting the dormitory. It says instead that it was targeting a drone command center in the area. So the Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said yesterday, quote, if the Kyiv regime is consciously committing such inhumane acts of terror against civilians, against children, then this is entirely different paradigm. So pretty obviously a sign of ramping up attacks. Now, in other news in the Baltic states, right now more than 1,000 US troops have begun withdrawing from Lithuania. This was part of a planned rotation that has now come to an end. So yesterday, the defense minister of Lithuania said that they have, quote, assurance that the next rotation in Lithuania will arrive, but when exactly and with which capabilities and at what size, this is due to be announced. Now, in other news in the South Caucasus, this from Meduza just yesterday. So we know that the Armenian parliamentary elections will be taking place this Sunday, June 7th, in polls conducted just 3 days ago, according to Euronews. Pashinyan, his party, is set to win like 65% of the vote, so a considerable majority. However, according to Meduza, apparently Kremlin-linked bot networks have launched a sprawling disinformation campaign targeting Armenia and Pashinyan, who obviously has been going in this more pro-Western, pro-EU direction. A report from Reuters in particular says that the Kremlin has discussed a plan to send 100,000 Armenians currently living in Russia to vote in Yerevan this Sunday and to vote against Pashinyan. So super interesting news today. Make sure to like, follow, and repost. I'll be back here tomorrow.